There are many things that were constructed in this or your state that were gotten from cocoa money, and we can mention quite a few or quite a number of them, a handful of course, that we've seen in the country that were gotten by that. And that means that there was a time when Nigeria was also hell bent on the crude. The crude was not the major mainstay. The crude was not even a conversation. What was the conversation is, what can states do to produce? In fact, then, imagine that 5 trillion that we are losing in annual losses to post-harvest crisis in the country. Imagine that going into the GDP. How much of that will... Because we're now borrowing everywhere. How about we generate internally? And then that's a lot of generation. 5 trillion naira added to the Federal Allocation Committee. I mean, that's going to help a lot, right? So if you're not looking at what states can deliver, I think we are still joking.
Welcome to Daybreak Live this morning.
Good morning to you, Nigerians, and good morning to you, Yemi.
Yes, good morning, Jan. So, just like I said, we are discussing this particular headline this morning. The president is telling the governor, stop building unnecessary flyovers. And then, according to the story, a delegate of traditional rulers led by Oba Rashidi Adewoladaja met with the president just to congratulate him on the successful rescue of the abducted Owerri students and teachers. And then the president was telling them that, governors should really stop building flyovers, especially for areas, or let me say for states who are not experiencing traffic or hold up, intense traffic. Because I remember many years ago in Ibadan, you see that roundabout flyover, before that flyover, the traffic there was intense. As a matter of fact, people would stay there for 30 minutes, 1 hour sometimes, especially, in the evening when a lot of persons, are going on. But then after that flyover, it became easy. The traffic was no longer intense. So, but the president is saying, for areas that are not, experiencing intense traffic and hold up, let's focus on building roads that can help, the lives of people, that can help the security personnel to carry out their activities, and things like that. And I think it's a very valid discussion coming from the president, because I remember that 10 years ago, the governors were not collecting what they are collecting now in terms of allocation every single month. And I think the president also mentioned it. He said he was talking to Oba Rashidi, the former governor of Oyo State, that when both of us were governors, if we had this kind of allocation, I think we would have done more for the people. And I think it's valid, because these people are collecting, for some state, 400% increase in what they are collecting, 500, 300% increase, and it's a lot of money. And then they still have their IGL, their internally generated revenue. So I think it's something that the governors should look at. And I think even before now, I think about last year, the president also said something. He was telling the people, he said, hold your governors accountable. It's a very valid conversation, because these people are collecting more and they should be able to do more for the people. Not like the flyover is not okay. I mean, it's good for aesthetics, but then when in economics we call something scale of preference. Certain things should come first. For instance, if you want to choose between paying your rent and buying a car, you don't need an angel to tell you. Common sense will come to play, and tell you, okay, you need to pay your rent first before thinking of buying a car. So the roads are more important to Nigerians, I mean to the people, than flyovers, especially for areas that are not even experiencing intense traffic. And I think that's a good conversation this morning.
Absolutely, you're right. I was fascinated by this, and then it took me into a bit of study to understand what exactly is the case. Now, first, let me say that what the president said is economically sound. And I know if there's anybody who should have data as to what's happening in this country, I think it's the president, because he works with different bodies who are in the thick of things as to the statistics of every government across the 36 states in the country. So I think the president did not just say this because he wanted to hit at these people. He said it because there's a data that would back that fact. He's saying it because this is actually, and we've seen a lot of times too. But then I think it's not that the governors don't know what to do. What I was asking myself the question, so are we bankrupt of ideas as to nation building? Are we bankrupt of ideas as to innovation? And I discovered not exactly. What we are more concerned about is politics. And I always say this, that politics is most times a distraction to governance in Nigeria. And this is what I mean. When they do this project, tell me one project that a government will do that would require maybe a federal person or maybe the president himself to come and commission, if not all this kind of project, especially the flyovers. Oftentimes we've seen, it's like a trajectory. Everybody in every state that, makes a bridge that is long or something that is that big in terms of infrastructure, they will sometimes have to speak to the president about it, so the president will come to commission, or someone else who is saying that's Kedar, maybe the Minister of Works, for example, will now come and say, so that makes a lot of noise, and that is what they target. That's a political arrangement. Is called political prestige projects. That's what they call this kind of project. They want the prestige. It's not about whether the people want it. It's about how can I do this that the president will know? How can I do this that the Minister of Works will know? How can I do that the whole of Nigeria will hear that we've done something like this in the country? And so we see states competing as to who has a longer bridge. I've seen this conversation sometimes across social media. And people are trying to debate as to who has the best of infrastructures, and I'm saying no, it's not that our governors are bankrupt of ideas in that sense. It's just that they feel like doing the politically inclined prestige projects is better off building what will help the country or help their state in that sense. So the president makes mention that some of them are receiving 3-4 times more than they've received before, and that is valid. So what does that speak to? It speaks to the fact that if you ask me as a policymaker now, I came up with something, and this is also going to be backed up by some evidence that I've also seen. Just recently, the Punch newspaper brought out a report, and I think it's of interest to me and maybe to every other person that is listening and watching us this morning. And that particular story, it's on the Punch newspaper. It was published right on the Punch newspaper. And then it says that the Organization for Technology Advancement of Cold Chain in West Africa, that's OTACWA, disclosed that Nigeria recorded between 3.5 trillion naira and 5 trillion naira in post-harvest losses just in 2025. This data got me aback, and I was really surprised that we have this particular report going out and nobody's talking about it. Just in 2025, 3.5 trillion naira and 5 trillion naira was lost in post-harvest systems. And then let me take it a step further. I think the president of that particular association is Alexander Isong. He said that the country lost an estimated 30 to 40 million metric tons of food across major value chains. So what is the problem? We were taught in agriculture way back when we were in school that one of the problems militating against the success of agricultural development or the food production success that we're driving at in the country is one, poor road network. They told us two, poor storage facilities. And these are things like major things that we can understand as and a layman would understand. What we need is we need feeder roads from the points where they are being made. I'm talking about the farms, from the farms now to the places they are going to be used or to the place they are going to be stored. And those are the problems. That's what we need. Many years back, many states, or almost all the states in Nigeria, are known for something. They have what they call economical advantage, right? For example, there are many things that were constructed in this or your state that were gotten from cocoa money, and we can mention quite a few or quite a number of them, a handful of course, that we've seen in the country that were gotten by that. And that means that there was a time when Nigeria was also hell bent on the crude. The crude was not the major mainstay. The crude was not even a conversation. What was the conversation is, what can states do to produce? In fact, then, imagine that 5 trillion that we are losing in annual losses to post-harvest crisis in the country. Imagine that going into the GDP. How much of that will... Because we're now borrowing everywhere. How about we generate internally? And then that's a lot of generation. 5 trillion naira added to the Federal Allocation Committee. I mean, that's going to help a lot, right? So if you're not looking at what states can deliver, I think we are still joking, right? Governors should look inward. Look at what you can do. And I have quite a few research, but for want of time, I cannot really reel over them. But I will just say a few ones that I know. For example, if you say that maybe some states don't have advantage as much as some, I tell you for a fact that I beg to differ. Almost every state in this country has something they can produce, has something they can yield in terms of economy, and then to help the country move forward. But I think at the later end, one of the problems we have is that governors are not looking at these things. They are not looking inward. They are more concerned about the things they will get. And they are more concerned about their political position, their political continuity. You know, I want to still remain governor. I want people to see or think I'm working. But they don't really think about the felt needs of their people. What are these people needing? What is the felt need, not just perceived need? If you perceive that we need a flyover and then you bridge it, you have a bridge, it does not, I mean, how does that put food on an average person's table? Not exactly. But if you have feeder roads from the local settings, maybe like the rural settings to the urban settings, to, you know, from farms to storage centers and then to the people, I think it's a better development than roads. So let me just, when we had regions, like when we were Western region, Northern region, the Northern region, for example, was famous for groundnut pyramids in Kano. Where's groundnut pyramid now? You know, it symbolizes an export economy built on groundnuts, cotton, height, and livestock. That was a major mainstay of the northern region. The south, the western region, for example, cocoa financed landmark projects across Africa. You know, eastern region had palm oil and palm kernel production in massive production capacity in the country. Jos Plateau, for example, was notable for having one of the most notable mining centers, right, in the mid 20th century. Enugu, Nigeria's coal capital. That's what they call it. Benue State, for example, the food basket of the nation. Abba State, that's Abia, I guess. A thriving manufacturing hub known for leather goods. Okay, that's Abba market, the popular Abba market that we all know. So the case is almost every state can generate so much, but the states governors are not looking at this, and I think it's one thing we should now focus on instead of just, I know, yes, we need flyovers, we need project infrastructures, yes, but much more so, what do we need first? I think it's like you said, the scale of preference. What comes first? I think that's one of the things that should top our priority list.
Yeah, good argument. And then even beyond that, I want to add something to it, because I think the president did not even mention it. You know, constructing roads, flyovers, I think is like the responsibility of governors in a state. And I remember a few months back, I don't know whether you've heard about the flyover that was actually constructed in Edo State, the very first one. I think the Ramat Park flyover. And then some students visited that place, you know, for excursion purpose, and Nigerians were not having it because they're asking questions. How come they didn't visit any museum or universities or factories? How come they went there for an excursion? But then maybe the school decided to say, okay, this is the very first one in Edo State, so let's visit. So this is my argument. Even beyond the construction of roads and flyovers, we should also look at other sectors. I mean, the lives of people should improve because of the kind of allocation that the governors are receiving this time. I'm talking about health. I saw in the newspaper this morning that resident doctors might actually go on strike, you know, come August because of certain demands. I mean, these are the things we should begin to look at. Health. Let's look at health. I also read the reports that said that in Ogun State, we have about 1,200 doctors, you know, that are handling about 9 million residents in Ogun State. It's a disaster. Let's not lie to ourselves. Because, I mean, if that is happening in Ogun State, what about other states? So there are other things to look at. There are other places where we can pump this money. Health, education, you know, talk about all the things, not just construction of roads. Because it appears that in the last few months, some governors are always very excited to invite the president to say, oh, we have built this road, come and you know, commission it, and this and that. Is excellent. It will help us. It will help the business people, because I mean, it will make their let me say, it will make their going and coming very easy. You know, I don't know. There's a word I'm looking for now, but I cannot remember. But it will make their going and coming very easy. You know. But then beyond the roads, let's also look at other areas that can help the people, that can make the lives of people better. Let's talk about health. Let's talk about, you know, education. Let's talk about, you know, building factories. Let's talk about all these things. There are some universities in this nation, in some states, you know, they are not performing the way they should perform. I'm talking about, you know, the lecturers. I'm talking about the facilities in the school. Look at what private people are doing. People who own private universities. Look at what they are doing. These people don't experience the kind of issues that we experience in federal universities. In some federal universities today, some students cannot stay in the school still. Why? Because the situation is very poor, it's very bad. They rather go and rent a place outside the school, even though it will not help, you know, it will not help them in a way, but they don't have a choice. So I think the roads are good, you know. The flyover too is okay if traffic is intense, according to the president. But then we should also look at all other areas so that we can better the lives of the people, because you have the money. And they talk about IGR as well. Yes, some states might not be generating, you know, the kind of money some other states are generating, but then you have enough allocation. The president said, hold your governors accountable, because most Nigerians are always very concerned about the president, the federal. They are not talking about the state governors. They are not talking about the local government chairman. If you don't hold these people accountable, it's not just about the president. These people also have a role to play. But then it's a good one coming from the president, and I think it's a
sorry. Let me like very briefly. Let me just double down on one of the points I made. Maybe I will speak to the president to say, sir, can you also, is there any way we can find a way that whenever you run a massive project, a capital project in the state, the president doesn't have to come? maybe someone can represent it. I'm not even the Minister of Works. We don't want it to be. I think that's one of the things these people are looking at. And it's also a political thing. That's, you see, whenever they are constructing roads and they have constructed bridges and all of that, and they want to commission, and the president is there, they turn it into a political arena. They turn it into, for example, APC something or PDP something. Everybody, they now fly their colors and all of that and say, yes, APC is doing. It's not APC. You are in power. You should do. These are the least of the things we expect from a government. We should not be celebrating that the government is building a bridge. The money is not your personal money. It's the money of the state government, right? You should use it for the people. So it should not be a thing that. So I'm saying if the president can also make maybe a few, just a twitch there, here and there, to say, whenever you have a capital project, we don't have to be there. We don't have to come and praise you and say, do what you are supposed to do, and let's have it running. Nigeria can be better if we look inward. We have so many potentials, but it's just lying at the state of potentiality. It has not gone to the place of kinetic energy. We've not really put work to these things to make it work. It's not in motion. It's just in a state of rest, and we need to move from the state of rest if we want to move forward.
Exactly. Just like I mentioned, I mean, building roads is like the major responsibility of any state governor or state government. So it's not a big deal, really. People are expecting more from the governors. It's a fine place to leave that discussion. This morning, we take a short break, and when we come back, we move on to newspaper headlines and analysis. We'll be right back.